Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and I'm so very thrilled to welcome Christina Camarena to the podcast today to talk about Plaza Suite, a comedy starring Walter Matthau, Lee Grant, and Maureen Stapleton, released 50 years ago in April of 1971. How are we doing, Christina?
I'm good. How are you?
It actually was May of 71. I don't know why I said April.
I mean, close enough. It was 71.
We're recording this at the end of February. We're just so far out on this one that I'm like, wait, what month? What day did it come out?
First of all, time isn't real anymore.
Time
right?
has
COVID
stopped.
Time, so there's no concept of
Mar-
days or months. So it's
March of 2020 has lasted a long time, Christina.
the longest month of my life. Right? Like, when will it end?
So in the regular calendar, it came out in early May of 71. This is the second film of the podcast I'm talking about this year about Walter Matthau. I just recorded an episode, it will have dropped by now, about a film called A New Leaf, where Walter Matthau was the lead, a film written and directed by Elaine May, which I talked about with Molly Gutman, another one of our friends from the University of Nevada, Reno's MFA program. That's how we know each other. Christina and I went to UNR for 3 years, getting our MFA from 2015 to 2018. What are your memories from that time?
Oh my gosh, memories. It's like a giant blur, right? I had small children. I was in grad school. I mean, but just absolutely so much fun. We were so lucky to have a great group of students, and then we all got to start, so many of us together, and it really felt like a family, and I miss it all the time.
We were part of the inaugural year of the MFA program. There were 7 of us fiction writers and I think 4 poets.
Yeah,
and we just
total.
all got along so well. I remember meeting you at I think it was a reading of some kind right before the semester started.
Yeah,
and I was like, oh, I don't remember who
I remember just cracking jokes in your ear. Even though I just met you, I felt already like
you were like, I knew within 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, I was like, okay, this is going to be one of my best friends in this program. This woman's amazing.
Yeah,
and I have not seen your face in what, more than 2 years? It's
no.
When was last?
We went to sushi the last
before COVID.
Oh, no,
Was it
last Christmas or last summer?
I think it would have been summer or fall of 2019, something around there. So it's been a long time. It's so great to see you.
It's so good.
And talk about this wacky, random comedy.
Real wacky.
So before
comedy
we get to,
seems like a generous word. Okay. I'm
how do you describe Plaza Suite? I mean, it's really not a comedy until the last story. The first 2 have comedic moments, but
with the woman, I did not find Walter Matthau funny. It didn't seem like he was trying to be funny in the first 2 to me.
Oh no, I mean, I thought he was doing in the second story. He's trying to be kind of goofy.
But it was so creepy. It was so like creepy Hollywood exec date rapey that I couldn't.
Yeah,
it was one of those ones where it felt like
segment 2 has not aged well.
Oh no, actually, none of them have. I don't think any of them have.
Yeah, and that's the nature of the beast, right? Christina, looking at films from 50 years ago, almost every film, there's something problematic.
Something? Well, I guess I just don't know enough about the cultural context of like cinema at the time to know if this was funny or not. Like, what was it doing? I don't know.
Well, it was nominated for the Golden Globe for Best Musical or Comedy, Christina.
Oh, okay. Wait, what?
So you know the Golden Globe Awards? The Golden Globe Awards, they have categories for film in both drama and comedy musical. And Plaza Suite got a Best Picture of the Year nomination for Best Motion Picture Musical or Comedy.
Music. For its music.
Or no, like Best Comedy of the Year. So Golden Globes, they have a category if you're a comedy or you're a musical.
A musical. Okay. I was going to say, did I miss some live musical numbers?
Christina's like,
I maybe watched the wrong movie.
Did I watch the right movie here? Was Walter Matthau singing at any point?
That would be funny, though. I would dig it.
All right. So before we get into the movie, Christina, I just wanted to ask you kind of in general, like what role has movies played in your life? Do you have a couple favorites you can share with us? Like what are some of your favorite movies?
You know how hard it is for me to follow the rules that I'm given. So I had a really hard time coming up with just a couple favorites.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna first say, of course, all the usuals, all the like standard like Wizard of Oz, Sound of Music, all that stuff, of course. But I wanted to talk about something else.
Okay.
So if I had to say off the top of my head, the movies that I could watch like over and over and over, I would say Hedwig and the Angry Inch, which I've seen like probably 5,000 times, and
So
even
good.
had my students watch.
20th anniversary this year, came out in August of 2001.
Is that how old I am? Okay, that's kind of mind-boggling to me. Okay, Hedwig and the Angry Inch, Drowning Mona, one of the greatest movies ever made, right?
Drowning Mona is so
Yes.
much fun. I don't think I've ever
Hilarious.
met someone who liked that movie.
You know how much I love it, because I used to talk about it all the time. When you posted it on it for your podcast, I was so excited. You didn't post, you posted like a thing on Facebook about it, and I was just like, best movie
Okay,
ever.
because I'm a huge Jamie Lee Curtis and Neve Campbell fan, and they're both in that movie.
Hello, I would say this is even one of my favorite Jamie Lee Curtis movies. Like, she is so funny, so funny.
Yeah.
Waiting for Guffman and Shaun of the Dead. So I came up with my top 4 for right now, but you know, these changes all the time.
Waiting for Guffman, I just talked about in a recent episode, one of my favorite films, definitely one of my favorite comedies.
Ever.
It's so great. That twist ending just guts you like very few other comedy endings do.
Yeah. Yes. And then Parker,
you really
Posey
think that's him
with their fork and like the chicken breast, flipping it, talking about blizzard she's making at the DQ. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's fantastic. It's one of my, I love Parker Posey too. She's one of my
and
favorites.
If you're a fan of Schitt's Creek, right? Schitt's Creek, which is so great on Netflix, Catherine O'Hara and Eugene Levy, both in Waiting for Guffman, are fantastic.
And Best in Show, and like all
A Mighty Wind.
I mean, the first two are the best, right?
Yeah.
A Mighty Wind kind of started out.
I like For Your Consideration more than other people do. I like Catherine O'Hara is great in that movie. I thought she deserved.
Is always
more.
Great.
She's always
can't not be great.
But yeah, the best of the guest movies for me are Waiting for Guffman and Best in Show.
Fantastic. And I guess The Princess Bride, but that's like a standard, right? And he doesn't direct it; he's just in it.
He's in it. Rob Reiner directed The Princess
Bride.
Right.
But so you were just talking about that one in the last one I watched too. That's why I was like, oh, well, I don't want to repeat Wizard of Oz and all the same movies that everyone else is repeating.
That's okay. You know, if Wizard of Oz is your favorite, it's only come up a few dozen times. So.
Right. Out of 22.
No, I don't think I think it's come up maybe twice. Yeah. But yeah, Wizard of Oz is one of those movies. I don't even think of it as a film. Like, it's just so like iconic of a property. It's like, it's hard to believe that's just a movie.
It's just the thing that always exists and is the best.
So that's great. So some of your favorites are comedies, which is good for today's episode, which
big on comedy.
Which is at least a third of a comedy, right?
I mean, is it?
So here's the summary. For those of you who may not have any clue what this movie Plaza Suite is, here's a very brief summary of what's going on here. So Walter Matthau, the great Walter Matthau, plays 3 roles in this movie. A film comprised of 3 separate stories about relationships, all within the walls of the same suite, 719, at the Plaza Hotel in New York City, circa when was the shot? Probably 1970. In the first story, a couple in their 40s come to blows over their strained relationship. In the second, a womanizing Hollywood producer has a run-in with an old flame from his hometown. In the third story, a couple do everything they can to get their daughter Mimsy out of a locked bathroom to get her wedding started in the Baroque room down below. And each story is about 35 to 40 minutes long. And really the only connecting tissue is Walter Matthau and the fact that they're all in this room. Tonally, oddly enough, they're not really similar. Which is not something you see in a lot of films that have like anthology films that have 3 to 5 stories. You know, horror films have done it, dramas have done it. Usually they're tonally connected, Christina, in a way. Whereas this movie is not.
I mean, well, that's what when you had mentioned in the email you sent me about like, or in the text about like the story, and I'm thinking about story arc the way we talked about it in workshop. I was like,
how do you approach this one?
Something here because. But you know what? I did because that's how we were trained to be, right?
Yeah. So after like 18 workshops, we're finally officially trained. to look for this stuff. How many workshops did we do? I mean, by the end, I was like, I have done a lot of these.
I don't know. 9,
Talking about stories.
10, 11. Oh.
Yeah. So I have some background information on the movie, Christina. You'll get a kick out of some of this stuff. So this was written by Neil Simon. The great Neil Simon, who wrote lots of classic stage plays and films. You might not recognize his name, but you'll know some of his work.
No, I recognized his name, but I wasn't sure. I didn't know that much about him.
So he received 4 Oscar nominations in his long film career for The Odd Couple, The Sunshine Boys, The Goodbye Girl, and California Suite. He also wrote, you might have heard of a couple of these, Barefoot in the Park, The Heartbreak Kid, Brighton Beach Memoirs, and Lost in Yonkers.
A couple of those sound familiar.
All became pretty popular films at the time. His play for Plaza Suite originally had 4 acts, Christina, not 3. There was a 4th. She would have been really mad. She would have turned it off.
No, but I did have to take a break.
You took a break between each segment. You're like, okay, time
break. I took one break.
So the first act, Christina, before the first act of what became in the final movie, there was another smaller act at the beginning about a man losing his luggage and checking into the Plaza Hotel. When it was on the stage, the play's director, Mike Nichols, the great Mike Nichols, said, if they include this opening act, the curtain's not going to come down until after midnight.
Right.
So they cut it. So they cut the opening bit. So they.
But what if that was the good one? But what if that was the good one, Brian?
I think there's some positive. I mean, we'll get into it. I really didn't think the second.
The things that I get caught up on. It's hard for me to see past certain things. It's very difficult for me.
That's okay. If you really want to destroy the film, Christina, go for it. I have not had a guest do that yet. I've had a couple disappointed guests, but I have not had a guest just eviscerate a movie yet. So it's coming.
No, I'm not going to do that.
So the film was directed by Arthur Hiller, who was just nominated for an Oscar for Best Director for his previous film Love Story at the beginning of 1971. Have you heard of Love Story? It was the most popular movie of 1970, and it's like grossed over $100 million circa 1970.
Wow, that's a lot.
And it's this like small, intimate drama about a couple. And we did an episode about it a few months ago, and it's like, how did this happen? How did this movie?
Good? Is it worth watching?
It's very good. It's a very strong film.
Does it survive the 50 years? The question.
I thought it did. I thought it did fairly well. It's a little dated, like. It's not like
it has to be a little dated.
It's not like 5 Easy Pieces, which is the best film I've talked about on the podcast so far from 1970, starring Jack Nicholson. That movie is insanely good. Yeah, write it down. 5 Easy Pieces. You will have a good time. It's fantastic. If you like Jack Nicholson, it's great.
I do.
So Arthur Hiller, the director of Plaza Suite, this guy was super prolific at the time. In the course of 18 months, Christina, he directed 4 films.
Whoa.
Which most directors make 1 film every 2 to 4 years.
I was gonna say he's a movie making machine.
So in 1970, he's got The Out of Towners with Jack Lemmon and Love Story, which is the biggest movie of the year. So he could have taken a break after that and been like, hey, I got an Oscar nomination, but no, he comes back.
Maybe this movie was his break.
This was where he was checked out. So he comes back in the first half of 71 with Plaza Suite. And then in December of 71, he's got an Oscar-winning film called The Hospital, starring George C. Scott. Wow. So in the course of like less than 2 years, he's got 4 films. That's pretty unheard of.
Yeah, that's very impressive.
You would see that in the 30s and 40s. You had workaholic film directors who were just churning them out. But after like the 60s, like most directors have 1 film every 2 to 4 years. That's kind of
when they start making so much bank, they didn't need to work so hard, right? Like,
you have the occasional director who has 1 a year for a while. There's some famous figures there, but to have 4 in 2 years, that's pretty spectacular. So that's pretty fantastic. So the original Broadway production, Christina, opened on February 14th, 1968.
Oh, romantic.
Opening night of the Broadway program. The Broadway production of the play. Okay. So many films I've talked about on the podcast, Christina, are based on plays. I don't know what that's about. It's like
I think I might like this more as a play. I think I really do.
I think this film is very stagey. I think it would work better on a stage with I agree with that. We'll get into that. It ran for almost 1,100 performances. The play was nominated for 3 Tony Awards, including Maureen Stapleton for Best Actress. So get this, Christina, on the stage. I don't know if you had this thought watching the movie. I sure did. I was like, why is Walter Matthau playing all 3 men?
Yeah.
But it's 3 different women. That was very strange. So what do you think it was on stage?
If it was the same woman in all 3, I mean, it would make more sense.
It
right?
was the same
Especially
woman in all 3. So on the stage, it was 2 actors, a man and a woman, and they played all 3 parts on stage.
That would have made a lot more sense.
So what happened? Where did that? Was it Arthur Hiller, the director, who was like, give me 3 women?
I mean, we've got Walter Matthau. He's like a big name. Everybody loves him, but we got to mix up get quite a few beautiful, funny women in here. I don't know.
So on stage, Maureen Stapleton, who plays the woman in the first act,
the more
emotional story.
I did like her.
She's fantastic. She's in a bunch of great films. A lot.
Yeah, she looked real familiar.
She played all 3 female roles on stage of Karen, Muriel, and Norma. But then for the film version, they get 3 different women for that. So that was kind of.
I also think it's interesting that she was in the play version and in the film version.
Yeah.
Is that common?
Sometimes. I mean, I think around 1970, 1971, there's not as much of an emphasis in getting big names for projects. Like you can make a small budget movie and you don't have to get the biggest female name of the time to be in it. So whereas now, I think if you were to update a film from the stage, like the recent movie The Prom on Netflix in December, like Meryl Streep did not appear in the stage version, but for the movie they got Meryl Streep. So I think when Meryl,
she could probably do it.
When Meryl says yes, they're like, well, we're gonna go with her.
Yeah, you'll take anything.
But I think back then, I think for the most part they get a lot of the same actors from the show.
Sure, that's cool.
So on stage, it was George C. Scott who played all the male roles. Do you know who he is? He was he won an Oscar for playing Patton. Have you heard of the movie Patton from 1970?
Yes, but that doesn't click in my head who it is. I mean, I can't see his face.
Yeah. He was a working actor. He's in Dr. Strangelove. He's in a lot of great films.
Oh, okay.
He was on stage, and then Stapleton was the woman, as I said. When Paramount announced the film version in 1969, it was to be George C. Scott and Maureen Stapleton in the first story, Peter Sellers and Barbara Streisand in the second story, and Walter Matthau and Lucille Ball in the third story.
That would have been funny.
Which sounds perfect, because really Walter Matthau was more of a comedic actor. He feels very much at home in the third story, I thought, right? Like that really made sense for him.
Yeah. Oh no, totally.
Whereas him playing the more dramatic role in the first one, it took me out a little bit. I was like, why have him for this?
It didn't feel natural.
Yeah.
For what I'm used to.
Which we'll get into. Okay. I think for this movie to have worked better, it needed to be 6 actors or 2.
Yeah, I agree.
Right?
Completely. I agree completely.
Because I don't understand why it's him all the way through, especially since they're like connected, like he'll be walking downstairs after story 1 is done,
and then
they just continue into
the beginning
of
the second one. As she's walking out by herself, he's getting out as a new character out of the cab. Yeah,
the same actor in the same shot. It's like, okay,
that's why you texted, get ready to be confused. And I was like,
yeah, you are the first guest, Christina, to be texting me while watching the movie, and you were sending some great text. You were yelling at me, and you were like, what's gonna happen next? And I'm like, oh, just get ready, because you're gonna be like,
why are you doing this to me?
So this is what Neil Simon later said about the movie, Christina. He said, I didn't like the cast. I didn't like the movie.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I would only have used Walter Matthau in the last sequence and Lee Grant. I think Matthau was wrong to play all 3 parts. That's a trick only Peter Sellers can do, which I agree with.
Wow.
I have
That's
to
harsh on his own movie and his own main
his
actor.
own movie. Well, he didn't direct it. Usually screenwriters are more
right,
forthcoming
right.
if they just wrote it and they can be like, oh, it wasn't my fault.
right. Somebody else ruined that.
He went on to say, I have to accept some of the blame for the film. I kept all the action in one room. It was rather confining. We could have gone into other suites. I didn't think it out, but I learned from that.
Why would going into other suites mix it up that much? So there's a table over there instead of over here.
Yeah.
I
like
mean,
more in the hallway.
The setting wasn't the problem for me. Let's just say that.
Okay. And then the last thing, I mentioned it briefly before, the film was nominated for 2 Golden Globe Awards for 1971, Best Motion Picture Comedy or Musical, and Best Supporting Actress in a Motion Picture for Maureen Stapleton, which if any actor I think was going to get nominated for something from this movie, I think Maureen Stapleton is the one to nominate.
No,
she was the best.
It's the
she was
girl
the best
in the
part
bathroom in the third part. Her performance was incredible.
When he's looking through, like, seeing his daughter in the bathroom. What was she doing? Like combing her hair?
She was looking in a mirror at her eyelashes or something.
Okay.
That's all right.
So that's all our trivia here. So Christina, what did we think of Plaza Suite? What would be your review of this movie?
I'm not going to be prepared with anything as polished as a review, but I will tell you that it was hard to get through.
It was hard to get through. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it just didn't last well. You should have seen Walter and I's faces when the F words dropped in the middle one, where we're just like, what?
About a woman. I was like, what the hell is happening right now?
Yeah.
Speaking of problematic.
Really,
yeah.
You know, the first one, I there was points in time where I thought I could get drawn into this. Because, is her name Maureen Stapleton?
Maureen Stapleton. Maureen. Yeah.
She was funny. She had these little moments where she was poking him and making jokes, making fun of him. You know, because he was so serious, he was so angry. But there was so many of these things that we see all the time. These like horrible sexist bullshit that goes on, the stereotypes that he was bringing to the screen. They just rubbed me the wrong way.
Are you talking about the first story, how we find out that actually he is sleeping with the secretary? You're talking about that part?
First of all, what a tired stereotype, right?
But she says that though, right? She says, really, you're going to be this much of a cliche. Like she points it out.
Yeah, she's funny in that one. She's funnier, except that it's just so like, there was a moment, I think I texted you, where I thought it was going to be like a redo this life movie, right? He says this thing like, I wish I would have done things differently or whatever. And I thought, is this gonna be one of those movies where we go back and we see him? So at the beginning of the second one, I thought that's what was happening, is this like the guy who didn't choose that life or didn't marry that woman or whatever in this other life. And then it became clear really quickly that wasn't happening. But it's like that stereotype, right? Of like, he's cheating on her and then he's mean to her, you know, trying to make her feel like she's crazy, right? Like, you don't know how old you are. You don't know what room we were in. You know, this constant
belittling her, making her think she's crazy.
Right. Why? To hide an affair. And so it really bothered me. But then I thought I could get invested in these characters, especially the wife. But then it switched up, and the second one was so cringy. Like it just can't.
Especially post like Me Too movement, like post 2017.
Like I don't think that you can't make jokes about that right now, not in that way.
Yeah.
If I felt like it was being critical, this is the thing I couldn't figure out, and this is the thing I keep thinking about. Is I don't know enough about cinema in the early 1970s to understand, like, was this making fun of these stereotypes?
That's a good question to ask. Yeah, I mean, there's been stories about infidelity that I've seen. A lot of them treat it more seriously, like a really great film I watched last year called Loving, which is about divorce. But this movie, it's trying to like be both funny and take it seriously, and I don't know if it's effective in that way.
Well, so right after we finished the movie, this is a little side story, but it's what actually made me give more thought to this movie. Because at the end, I was just like, wow, like, wow, that was terrible. There's this guy's trying to practically rape this woman in the middle.
In the second story,
and
yeah.
it's called a comedy. And then in the third one, it's almost like this daughter gets traded from her dad telling her what to do to like, now her husband comes in and now he's telling her what to do, and she's just like, okay. And you think is it trying to resist these stereotypes, or is it the stereotypes? And so we're watching this show, the Jim Gaffigan Show. Have you seen it?
I've heard of it, yeah.
It's hilarious. And this is one of the things that he makes fun of a lot, right? Is this idea that like there's an episode where his face is on the cover of a parenting magazine, and the article is titled Super Dad, right? And they have 5 kids, but the whole episode he's getting all this praise, and he's trying to be like, but my wife does 90% of the work, right? And nobody really acknowledges her, but for him, they're just like, oh my gosh, you're such a great dad. And so he's it's kind of a social commentary, right? So the episode that we watched right after we watched that movie, because I needed something that was actually going to make me laugh, like out loud.
So just so you know, like for our listeners, I do not watch the films before. Like,
I didn't realize that either. I didn't realize
like that. I don't like watch the films and then think, oh, who would be good for that? I just look at like the synopsis and what the movie is, and then so sometimes we come into this just like, I don't know what to say about it, like it's not a matter of like, oh, I'm gonna give Christina the really bad
this
movie.
Is gonna make Christina crazy.
I don't know. Going into
Walter was like, do you think he picked you on purpose for this?
And I didn't. I had just talked with Molly about a Walter Matthau comedy, A New Leaf, which I think you would like better than this movie. And then I saw it was like this zany kind of screwball comedy. That's what I thought it was, based on what I read about it. And it's got these great women in it, Maureen Stapleton and Lee Grant and Barbara Harris, 3 actresses I adore. And it's based on a Neil Simon play. Neil Simon, one of the most famous playwrights of the 20th century. I'm like, okay, this has to be pretty good. And I saw it got a Golden Globe nomination for Best Picture. I'm like, oh, well, this will be pretty solid. And yeah, I think we can both agree it was kind of disappointing.
It was very well, but it was thought-provoking. Okay, so I'm watching this Jim Gaffigan episode, and it's an episode where like his wife has to go to the dentist, and he's supposed to take all 5 kids to the museum, and he won't even get out of bed. And she's like, you gotta get out of bed and get the kids up. And he's like, wake me up when the kids are ready. And she's like, no, I'm leaving. Like, you have to do this. And then they go to the museum and they end up in the food court eating. Like, right? And so I could see if this episode or this show were taken out of context, and someone like 50 years from now who didn't know might look at that and not be sure if it's criticizing these kinds of like gender double standards or if it's reinforcing them. And so that's what I was thinking about with this movie is it trying to critique these stereotypes? We've basically got the 3 big stereotypes: the middle-age crisis cheating businessman husband with the wife who won't leave anyway, who doesn't plan on leaving, the sleazeball who
movie
tries
producer
to use their power, which is, all these
to seduce a woman who he hasn't seen in 15 years.
And then like, the parents who are outdated generationally, who are like, get out there and marry your husband so you can have our lives. And then they're like, wait, maybe she doesn't want our lives. And then she's like, just kidding, I do. So, which I did think that was funny, but I just wasn't. I mean, what do you think? Was this like a straightforward trying to make people laugh?
I feel like the women in this movie comment on all of these kind of tropes. They do. To the point where I think there is some insight into these, in that it's not just, we're just going to tell these stories that have been done 1,000 times before and not bring anything new. Like, I think Maureen Stapleton's performance brings a lot to that story, that if through the dialogue by Neil Simon and through her performance, I think that first segment goes beyond just, it's your typical guys cheating on his wife with a younger woman story, through Maureen Stapleton's character. And
because her character is weird and quirky and funny.
And seeing it through her eyes and the way she reacts to it, I feel like there's layers there. I don't think it's just like your typical kind of reaction. I don't know. I thought the women in this movie, for me, all 3 of the women made this work better than it would have.
Definitely. I agree.
If it had been all men playing the roles, it wouldn't have worked. No, but like the actresses in this. But I mean, it's hard to ignore a movie that has Maureen Stapleton. Barbara Harris is the woman in the second story. Just one of the
She
most
was really familiar.
stunningly gorgeous actresses of the time.
Fantastic,
she went on to work with Alfred Hitchcock and Family Plot.
Yes,
and she's in the 70s version of Freaky Friday.
I have not seen that.
Which I believe is the other one is Jodie Foster, I think, plays the daughter.
Ooh,
so that I've
interested.
never seen that version. I kind of want to see it now.
Yeah.
And then Lee Grant, who we'll talk about at the end, she's a fantastic 4-time Oscar nominated actress. Won an Oscar for Shampoo. She's in my all-time favorite comedy, Defending Your Life, and just such a fantastic actress. Still like doing work today. Like I looked at on video on YouTube. Like she's still being interviewed about her career. She's 95, Christina.
I'm gonna have to go watch one of those.
And still looks great. She still looks fantastic.
How could she not? She's gorgeous.
Yeah. So yeah, I think they elevate this material more than Matthau. I think Matthau was a little bit miscast in this. As I said once before, the third story, he makes sense for that guy. Like that feels like a Matthau character. Not to say that he can't branch out and do other things, but especially segment 2, he's so weird looking that I just could never get
creepy. And then
he's got like blonde hair
accent that then he loses, and it's like slicked down. I don't know.
He looks
that whole middle one made me so uncomfortable.
He looks very strange in the second one. And Barbara Harris, I think that's like the least written of the 3 segments in terms of like the female character. She has a little bit to do, but
resist.
She does resist. She wants to leave, and I'm like, well, if she leaves, then the segment's over, so she can't leave. So she has to stay.
But also, the whole time I was like, just walk out that door, and he's like physically pulling her, and I'm checking on my phone. It's listed as a comedy, though, right? There can't be like sexual violence in a comedy, right?
Yeah, at least the movie didn't go there. Like I was like, okay, is this really gonna shift in tone this much, so where it's gonna be like a creepy, like
it kind of felt like it was gonna.
It almost went there, but I don't know. You have Walter Matthau. That would have been very strange, but
so weird.
Have you seen Walter Matthau in any other films? Like, do you know of his work at all?
So if I was gonna bring it up, but I didn't want to get so off topic again because I know I keep doing that, but Grumpy Old Men, of course.
Yeah, Grumpy Old Men, and the sequel, which is really great.
Which I've seen. It's been so long since I saw, but I remember loving those movies, loving them. And now I'm sincerely worried that if I watch them again, I might
creep you out.
Yeah. Okay, so The Bad News Bears. So Walter, my Walter, is loves baseball, played baseball most of his life, loved this movie, a long time ago. So I bought him a copy of it. So I was like, it's like a cool, like little kids, on a baseball team, and Walter Matthau is so funny and all this stuff. So I bought it for him so we could watch it as a family.
Oh, cool. Not cool.
What happened? I had to hide it. I was like, my kids can't ever see this again.
Oh, is that rated R? The Bad News Bears?
No, it's not. Okay, that's confusing because there's like racial slurs, like homophobic.
It's like it's like a PG. It's like a PG 70s family film with racial slurs and just it was homophobia galore.
A lot of conversations.
Yeah. Homophobia has been a thing in a lot of these older movies where it takes me out for 20 minutes. I'm like, I can't.
It's so hard to just let it pass though, right? It's like,
because we're not used to hearing that anymore in modern films. So when you're watching a movie, you're into it 30, 40, and then just one little moment can completely remove me. And I'm like,
in Bad News Bears, it's a little kid dropping this language. Like that was that movie disappeared out of our collection mysteriously.
It mysteriously went away.
Yeah.
You would say you're a fan of Walter Matthau. Like he's been in some films.
I was. Sincerely, like I'm concerned that maybe I won't feel the same way if I watch Grumpy Old Men.
Interesting. So Walter Matthau, he was very much in demand at this period. So we just talked about A New Leaf on the podcast, which came out in March of 71. Plaza Suite was May. And then in the fall, he was the star of a film called Koch, which earned him an Oscar nomination for Best Actor of the Year. So he had a very busy, fairly successful 1971, Walter Matthau.
I mean, I knew he was really successful. I've only seen a few of his movies, but when I hear his name, I'm always like, oh, Walter Matthau.
And then
I
that went.
want that to continue. Like, I think it will.
I killed Christina's love for Walter Matthau. That's what the bottom line of this episode.
It just pushed me a little bit into thinking, like, do I need to is this one of those things like you watch a movie as a kid and then you watch it as an adult and you realize, I can't believe my parents even let me watch that. Like, it's terrible.
That does happen. There are films that have not aged well. Like when you watch them at age 7 or 8 or 9 and you're like, this is the greatest stuff. Then you watch it when you're an adult and you're like, why did I like this?
Sexism, racism, homophobia, like it's everywhere. What are you gonna do? It was 50 years ago.
So if you had to pick a favorite segment, would you go with the third one, the more comedic one? Was that your favorite of the three if you had to pick one, or was it the first one?
I don't know. I guess I would. I mean, it's hard because the way the third one ended, like, really bothered me.
Okay, the fact that that she comes out after her husband, her fiance knocks on the door,
and you think,
what does he say to her? Doesn't he say
cool
like,
it?
Cool it,
cool it?
And then she just opens the door. Okay, honey.
Okay. And we see that she's okay. Is it meant to be funny? And I think laugh more during that one because there is that like physical comedy.
There's more physical comedy, right? Of him trying to break into the room.
Ridiculous. Yeah, it's funny.
The shot of him on the ledge is really funny.
Right. With pigeons at his feet, which of course I can't help but be like, those pigeons would never stay there.
And then it starts pouring rain, and his daughter still won't open the window to let him
or even answer. Oh yeah, right. So this stuff that all I thought was funny.
Yeah.
Although I was kind of jaded from the second segment. I think I would have enjoyed the third segment more if it had come second.
Oh, okay. Gosh, if the movie had ended with the second segment, that would have been really deadly. That would have been
well,
awful.
I know. No, that's the one that should have been cut. Okay.
They should have extended the first and the third and just had that be the movie.
Yeah, update it for 50 years later and add in the original first one and cut out like the date rapey one because it's gross.
Yeah, exactly.
But that part where you think, okay, so the mom is like, the mom and dad have this moment where they realize maybe we're not that happy.
That's like the best. That for me was the best part of segment 3. Was not the physical comedy. It was like them having that realization, like, oh, maybe she's afraid of becoming us. Are we not? Yep. Are we not happy together? And it was those moments in the movie I felt worked the best when they were like contemplative. It wasn't just about visual gags or like when actually they can just act and talk. And I like that stuff. Yeah.
And like realize, right? So those are the moments where we're like, okay, this is about more than just reinforcing stereotypes. Mm-hmm. But then the fiance shows up and she says, "Cool it," that she's not going to change. She is going to relive that life of that like partner who doesn't have the emotional, doesn't give the emotional support and just kind of bosses and is like, cool it and get down to our wedding. And she's like, okay, honey. And so I feel like there was an opportunity there that was lost, but I do think the third one was, I don't know. I love the actress the most in the first one. And I think the third one was the one that I thought was the funniest, but still it just rubbed me the wrong way. The way it ended.
The problem is looking at this 50 years on, it's that there's really nothing in this movie that surprises you, right? There's not really anything in there that take you by surprise with the plot or, you know, how each segment ends was kind of what I was expecting. Yep. There's nothing really, I feel like if you're going to make a movie like this with 3 set stories, and I think it was the great film critic Roger Ebert once who talked about if you ever make an anthology film, each segment has to be great. You can't be like, we'll make one really good and then the other 2 will just do whatever. We'll just show
throw
up.
A crappy one in the middle. No one will notice.
It doesn't work that way, man. If you do an anthology film, like you have to make them all work really well. And this movie doesn't quite nail it.
It doesn't. It does not. But also you have to think about it like this. Okay, so this was one of the things I was thinking about. This movie was made in 1971. Perhaps it is critiquing some gender stereotypes and some sexism.
Yeah.
But it has to do so in such smaller ways than we might see today. Like we were talking about like if we watch Trainwreck afterwards, right? Where we have like a female lead character who's the one breaking all the rules and doing all, being in many ways the way we've historically seen the male characters be. that never could have flown in 1971, right? And so,
Oh yeah.
so was it, that's the question that I can't answer, is was it progressive for its time or not?
I mean, I
Were
think,
audiences like, wow, that's, you know, the parents, that part we were just talking about, where the parents actually reflect on themselves and realize, oh my gosh, maybe, I mean, and I
the
just have no idea.
film was pretty well liked at the time. I saw the critic Gene Siskel gave it 3.5 out of 4 stars. He really liked it, and then for it to get the Golden Globe nomination, not to say that every movie nominated for a Golden Globe Best Picture is great.
It has to be. I mean,
but there were fans.
good.
There were fans of it. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, 71, it's still pretty early on in that decade for if we're really making strides with that kind of commentary. I feel like it's going to be films of like the later part of the decade where you really see a lot more of that. I feel like this movie is trying to just be like a silly kind of comedy, but then Neil Simon's trying to bring in some of these ideas, especially through the female roles, but not quite enough.
not far from enough for me, but that's one of the things where you say 50 years ago, I mean, it's hard to put yourself into that cultural context to say how would I have seen this, you know, 4 years before I was.
It's tough, and it's something I ask myself of every movie I watch for the podcast, like, well, geez, if you know, if this came out, if I were this age in 70, 71, like what, you know, it's just so different. The times are so different. It's 50 years ago. They're different 20 years ago.
Yeah. I agree. That's why I just don't know that I can assess it in a way that's fair to it.
But that's what makes an interesting dialogue, is you kind of have to look at the context of when it was made, and you can't always hate on a film if it's really, really, really old.
You got to put it in that context.
You have to put it into that context sometimes, which can be hard to do.
And I don't even know how, really, because I don't know a lot about older movies. I don't watch a lot of older films or read history.
You're not on any given weekend, you're not watching silent films.
I mean, I actually do love Charlie Chaplin, because we watched him when I was the TA for Daniel Enrique Perez, one of the greatest teachers on the planet. I was in his
at UNR?
The Core Humanities. Yeah, I was his TA for Core Humanities my last year of our MFA.
And he showed Charlie Chaplin?
It was one of the clips or something. I can't remember the context anymore, but he was talking about how really progressive Charlie Chaplin was, and how much he was like resisting, you know, oppression for working class people and all this stuff. And I loved it. I haven't watched more, even though in my mind at the time I was like, I'm going to add that to my list, but I never have. But I mean, I really loved it.
Take a look at his first feature film, The Kid, which came out in 1921. So 100 years ago. We just did a bonus episode of the podcast last month about The Kid. I've seen his other landmark films are, of course, City Lights and Modern Times.
Modern Times is the one we watched,
which is fantastic. Yeah.
Oh, it was fantastic.
Take a look at The Kid. It's really funny. And I think progressive, and really just uses the camera in a way that's really innovative for 1921.
Okay, so we can look at a movie from 100 years ago and know that was innovative.
Yeah.
Right. So that also gives us a little bit of perspective into this movie from
PLAZA SUITE,
where we're like, is it? Isn't it? I don't know.
Speaking of the director, Arthur Hiller, and the way this film is shot, it's not progressive in any way. It's very, you know, camera on sticks, or just kind of slowly moving around the room.
Well, what you expect. It's what you expect.
It's tough, right? So if you're making a feature film based on a stage play that's all set in one room, how do you make that visually exciting? It's very tricky. Well, Regina King just did it for a new movie called One Night in Miami. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Oh yeah,
it's on Amazon Prime, and it's I would say 80%.
Amazon. Sorry, I'll find it on YouTube or something. What's it called?
It's called One Night in Miami, and it's about 80%, I want to say, of the movie is 4 men in a hotel room, in a motel room, talking. And she uses the camera really, really well. It can be tricky because you want the standout to be the performances and the story. You don't want to be doing so many visual tricks that your audience is checking out. So you have to kind of find that balance.
But like we were talking about, just really briefly, unless I don't want to jump ahead, but that movie 4 Rooms. Mm-hmm. And each of those segments doesn't happen in the same room.
It's one hotel, right?
It's like the same basic hotel room, right?
Okay.
So it's not like, I mean, and that movie is, I really liked it. I haven't seen it in a long time, but it was funny, it was entertaining, it was fun to watch, and it was doing that thing, right?
Mhm.
Of like, here's the snapshot. Obviously, these people are all in the hotel at the same time, as opposed to Plaza Suites where they're like different times or whatever, but same room. But I thought Four Rooms did it really well. I thought it was
Four
funny.
Rooms, I saw it once many years ago. Isn't
So long ago.
the connecting tissue, I believe, is the actor Tim Roth. He's like the
Yes.
bellboy.
Yes.
But every story has other actors. Like they
Yeah,
don't really repeat.
there's like three kids whose parents want to go out that he's supposed to keep an eye on. There's all these different,
and each segment,
stories.
I believe each segment was directed by a different person. It's like 4 different directors.
That sounds
like
familiar.
Tarantino did one,
Yep.
Robert Rodriguez did one. And
well, for I saw this movie once a long time ago and I never thought of it again. You know all 4 directors off the top of your head. So you're definitely an expert.
But yeah, I like, in terms of like the timeline in Plaza Suite, it's very confusing. Having Walter Matthau play all 3 roles makes the timeline confusing, because you're like,
it does. Well, because you
all
can
in the
see
same
them
week?
crossing paths. You can see the second.
So you're supposed to believe that this is like 3 days in a row? Like
I don't know what we're supposed to.
One checks out and then the next one checks in and they're already like in the room. It's very confusing.
It's very confusing. Yeah, the setting is.
But yeah, I mean
I feel
Arthur Hiller does what he can as the director for this. I mean, I don't know, how much like what's the approach he gave to this in terms of like the cinematography, the production design. There's nothing really that stands out there. It's really just about the performances.
Yeah.
And I really would love to have been in that meeting where they were like, let's have Matthau play all 3.
I don't get it. I mean,
well, he was a big star. He was one of the top, I think he was one of the top 10 box office stars in 71, Christina. So that might have played a role. They were like,
but
well,
you can't force an actor into you know what I mean? It's
agreed.
like
he agreed to do it. So I'd be curious to know what Matthau's thinking was there. Like if
the goal's just to get a big name, great. That doesn't make a good movie, right?
I mean, I could see them coming to Matthau and saying, we want you to play all 3 guys, and the women will be Maureen Stapleton, Barbara Harris, and Lee Grant. And
he's like, I will be there.
He's doing that.
Definitely be there.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Heck yeah, who would say no to that, right?
I get to creepily make out with, kiss, the beautiful Barbara Harris. Sure.
I can't even talk about that segment. It's so creepy.
He does not like that segment.
He's like pouring booze down her throat while he's like literally pulling her towards.
It just, and it's not. Were there any jokes in the second story? It just felt kind of odd. Like it just wasn't very funny. Even if you weren't disgusted by his behavior, it's not very funny and it's not serious. So I didn't really know what they were trying to achieve.
Because I think that this is what bothers me about it, is that I really think that would have been perceived as a humorous situation, and she gets out of there safely, right? So it's okay.
Yeah.
But there's supposed to be something funny about it, like that. Again, the stereotype of the bachelor. What he calls like 6 women and tries to convince them to come to his hotel room that day. That stereotype of like that sleazy bachelor who runs through the Rolodex. That used to be a thing a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
and then finally catches someone and draws them in with all of these lies, right? And this is like a stereotype and like a version of masculinity that was at one time revered in this culture, right? Respected. I mean, how many movies do we see that are just about dudes behaving badly? Right?
Oh yeah, there's so many films going back decades. Yeah.
And so I that's the thing that bothers me about it, is I see a little bit more of that like edgy-ish, maybe like commentary in the other 2, and in the middle one, maybe it was there and I was just too distracted because how many times I yelled at the TV in that middle one. It was like it was a record.
Should part of this podcast have been you recording yourself watching the movie?
Oh my gosh, you would die. This is why Walter can't watch these kind of movies with me, because I must drive him crazy. Because I'm just like, stop it, let go.
You were just like out of your chair, like just in front of the TV, just screaming.
I mean,
get out of that room.
wasn't screaming, but I don't know if you can hear that I'm losing my voice a little. I'm not saying it was from that, but I'm not saying it wasn't. Okay.
So another thing that disappointed me, Christine, I don't know if you felt this way. I felt like at the very end of the movie, there should have been some sort of connection, like where we got Maureen Stapleton back, where we got Barbara Harris back, and maybe some sort of a closing scene where all three women bumped into each other or
I
something.
love that idea.
What we get is the movie
Nothing.
ends, like
Yeah.
we finally go outside at the end, and we get Matthau and Lee Grant like waving goodbye to their daughter. And then we go to these awkward, like this awkward montage of like the actors, like they're on stage, the actors walking up and taking a bow.
That's right. That
and
was
then
weird.
The credits come up, and you see all six of them or all four of them, whatever, do it, and then it just goes to the credits, and I'm just like, that's the very strange way to end the movie. There have been other films that ended like that, where like the cast takes a bow. Like I've seen that before, and it never works.
No, it doesn't. It's weird. And
You weren't applauding.
Throwing roses.
Christina was applauding herself for making it to the end.
I was applauding that it was over. No.
He was like, I did it.
I think you're on. I love that idea. It didn't occur to me like that, but my biggest thing was like, there was something that was either trying that they were trying to do that was clever that fell flat, or they just like forgot to do that clever thing. I don't know.
Because I was way more interested in all three of these women in the movie than I ever was with Matthau. Matthau, I feel like the best version of him is the third story, but even that one's kind of dated.
Terrible.
I mean,
I
you know, and you know, kind of getting into the final big question about the movie, Christina, and kind of looking at this through a 2021 lens. If someone were to make this today, I feel like it would have to be a story about these women, really, and not really about the guy.
Yeah. And the women are the interesting characters anyway, right? They're the interesting characters. And they're the ones who have funny things to say and sort of snarky little comments. And I could have spent, I love the idea of having a final segment that has just the women in it. I mean, that I would have been like, okay, now this movie's getting good.
Yeah, if the story was set up in a way where they just ditch all three of these guys, and then at the end they kind of come together, the three women, and it's like,
or a flipped script, or a flipped script, right? Where we have women behaving badly, or we mix it up where it's not just like the standard, like dude that's a dick, like wife who, sorry about the language, I don't know if you care or not, like I've been controlling myf, and you know that because you've met me.
Yes, I'm very very proud of you.
but you know, the wife who lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, and then the wife who's just sort of trapped in there. Now, if we were flipping these,
in the first segment,
or if we were mixing it up in terms of diversity, so like now maybe we have gay characters or trans characters, or you know,
absolutely,
not just like the white dude and the white wife who's like trapped in a loveless marriage, but mixing that all. I think that something interesting might come out of that, but that middle segment would never.
The middle segment would have to be heavily rewritten, even
if
it
wouldn't be a comedy.
Even if it was flipped, if it was like flipped genders, you would still have to, even if that was a woman preying on a younger man, it wouldn't work.
No,
so you have to rewrite that heavily.
Well, it wouldn't work as a comedy.
Yeah,
but it could work as a drama, right? It would like change the movie entirely.
Yeah, I feel like for this movie to work, I feel like all three segments have to be more tonally connected, like make them all funny or make them all serious. I think the way to go, like if I were to make this into a movie today, it would be a more serious film, and I'd make it about like real issues and have like the drama come through more. Even the third segment, I feel like you could make a good dramatic segment out of that.
That segment had so much potential.
Yeah. As a huge Lee Grant fan, who we'll talk about at the end here, like I felt like her character was a little bit underwritten. I wanted a little bit more emotion from her. More like we get a little monologue from her at the end where she's talking about how she's never gotten to really know her daughter. I thought that was a nice little minute or two. I wanted
when she
more
realizes that the daughter wants the dad, and she's like, but I'm your best friend. Like I worked hard to
But then do you get people into the theater in 1971 if it's just a drama? I feel like more people go to this movie in 71, at least when it's marketed as a comedy with Walter Matthau. I think you get more of an audience. So
sure,
I don't know, it's tricky. But I feel
Didn't
like,
get
yeah,
a lot of out loud laughs from me though. Just didn't. I
you
mean,
weren't chuckling all the way through that second segment.
God.
You were like,
Really
how long
distressing.
is story 2? So yeah,
At least I knew
agree.
it was going to end.
I think if they were to make this now, you would have to rewrite it heavily and have gay couples and have, interracial couples,
Yep. You got to mix it up.
trans,
People with disabilities. I mean,
people of
that's
color.
what,
Like, you would have to do that now. You couldn't just have it be 6 white people. There's no way.
Well,
like
7, because the daughter. Don't
or
forget the daughter.
Or Mimsy. Mimsy can be white, right? Like everyone else.
I mean, or you got to change your name, one or the other.
But and that's the case with a lot of these films I'm looking at. It's just so much whiteness on the screen. Christina, looking at all these big Hollywood movies at the time, very few female voices, which we talked about recently. Like studio movies, like, and not to say it's like a lot better today, but I mean, I would say the last 5 years it's definitely gotten a little better with female directors now. But boy, in the early 70s, it's just
you gotta search.
It is a straight white man's club, right?
Yep. Or at least allegedly straight.
Allegedly straight. Yes, exactly.
Right? I mean,
there were a few closeted actors and directors at the time for sure. But so yeah, any final thoughts on the movie? Any other scenes or performances? I mean, I feel like there's not a whole lot to talk about this one because it's in one room. I said it before. I really do think the director Arthur Hiller should have gone with either 2 actors or 6 actors. I think doing this like weird in the middle thing doesn't work.
And there's like a level of like a sort of a twist or a cleverness that's just missing. There's like how do they all come together in the end or whatever that piece is just missing.
And some films do that better than others. I know there's a lot of people. Have you seen the movie Magnolia from the late 90s?
I mean,
a lot
so
of people
long ago.
A lot of people hate that movie with all of its threads and plot story, all of the different characters, it all comes together at the end because frogs start raining from the sky.
Yeah,
some people are
feel like that movie landed with me at the end either. It's Tom Cruise, right?
Tom Cruise.
Yeah, not a fan.
Tom Cruise's best dramatic performance is absolutely Magnolia.
There were things I liked about it, but it wasn't a movie where I was like, I gotta go watch that again.
I gotta watch that every day.
Weird. Right? It's no Hedwig. I don't just want it on the background all the time so that I can sing the songs. Like
So Plaza Suites. There were things I liked about it. I felt like the biggest takeaway for me was the Maureen Stapleton performance. I think if I think about this movie a year from now, it'll be that more than anything else. And maybe him on the ledge.
I agree. She had so much potential there. Like,
honestly, Christina, what would have made this movie better would have been 35 minutes in. She leaves him. And the rest of the movie is about Maureen Stapleton.
Yes.
That would have been a great movie.
I was voting for that.
It could have stayed, it didn't have to go. She didn't have to go to like 26 different exteriors. She could have still stayed like a play. He could have left the room or something. But like really there's so many flaws to the second and third segments. I'm just like, why not make this about her?
Yeah.
The first, what was her name? The very first
it was Sam and
it was
I
Karen.
had it in my head.
It was
that's
Karen.
Right, that's right.
So Maureen Stapleton's Karen.
I could watch a whole movie about that.
I think a 90-minute film about her kind of leaving her husband 35 minutes in. I mean, there was some vulnerability to her that I can understand, like where she actually has the thought of like, oh, could I actually leave this man? Mm-hmm. She has that moment of like fear of like, oh, well, maybe we can go back to the way, which I think, especially for 1970, 1971, you can definitely, see what's going on there. But I just felt like her performance was so great. I just wanted more of it. And the fact that she doesn't even come in at the end, like that her character doesn't come in for a final scene of some kind, like as a little bit of closure. Yeah. I felt like that was a missed opportunity too.
I think so.
So I would give this film 2 stars out of 4. It's not one of the best I've looked at for the podcast, although not the worst.
What's the worst?
The worst film I've looked at so far is called Where's Papa? Which came out at the end of 1970, and it's 80 minutes long. Could have been about 45 minutes. Like it had enough story for about 45 minutes. And
Yeah.
that was like a slapstick broad comedy that did not make me laugh at all. And I was just it was deadly. It was so deadly. I almost didn't even do an episode about it. But then my guest
But then
liked
there's
it.
so much to talk about. Oh, your guest liked it?
Yeah. So
that's good.
It was
that's a great conversation.
It was kind of a fun conversation. I was never like, I would say the second segment in Plaza Suite was rough. I enjoyed myself in the first and third segments. Like I wasn't just like, oh my God, get to the credits. Like I
wasn't either.
The actors in it are so great that I was able to get to the end without a whole lot of difficulty.
I was just so irritated with Walter Matthau's character in the first episode.
Yeah, he was pretty awful. He was awful.
Jerk. And he was so terrible to her.
And then he's worse in the second segment. So
and I'm like, this is supposed to be funny. Like men mistreating women is supposed to be funny. And that's the third one I agree was the one I liked him the most in, but I think I liked the first segment the most as well, because she was interesting.
Yeah.
Her character was interesting. And weird and quirky and silly and
Maureen Stapleton. I'll have to look her up after we're done recording.
So familiar. Yeah.
Give you some idea. She won an Oscar for the movie Reds from 1981, directed by Warren Beatty and starring Diane Keaton.
I love all those.
Won an Oscar for that. She is in a movie called Airport from 1970, which is not a very good movie, but she's great in it. Got an Oscar nomination. So she had a really tremendous career in film and on stage. Maureen Stapleton.
I gotta figure out where I recognize her from. I didn't do a lot of times when I'm watching movies, I'm like searching,
like Googling actors. Who
that's
they are,
where they're from. Yeah. But I was so like, there's a test on this movie.
No, never.
I was really trying to stay focused until I couldn't stop yelling things at the TV.
All right, so that takes us to our final two segments. We've talked about the first one a little bit, the Divine Double Feature, where we pick a more modern film that would be a good movie to watch right after Plaza Suite ends. You were talking about Four Rooms and Trainwreck. I love Trainwreck. That's a great movie.
Oh, me too. I love it. I just wanted something that flips the table, on those roles.
Yeah.
But I went through, what other movie I thought of? Witches of Eastwick. But I know that's not within the last 20 years.
It's newer.
87.
87. Yeah.
You knew that off the top of your head. That's very impressive. Right, where they kind of like take him apart practically. I mean, it's just these women who are strong and plus it's really funny. It's like really, really funny. It has great actresses in it. But then I ended up landing on and I thought about Friends with Money. Do you remember that movie?
Right, with Jennifer Aniston and Catherine Keener.
I loved it. I did like it a lot, but because it was.
I love the work of that director, Nicole Holofcener. She does great work. She makes like independent films about women and their relationships.
Yes, and so it's that same kind of thing where she's kind of. Like everyone's always like, when are you going to get your real life? When are you going to, find the right guy and get a real job? And she's just like, I don't want to do any of those things. And so I think that movie in a lot of ways resists a lot of the stuff that's going on in
I feel like Plaza Suite would have been better if it had just been about these three women getting together for lunch.
Yeah, oh, totally. But then I landed on Crazy Stupid Love, and I don't know why.
Crazy Stupid Love. From 2011, right? With Steve Carell, Julianne Moore, Emma Stone, and beautiful Ryan Gosling.
I'm not gonna say that's the only reason I've seen that movie 100 times, but it's really good, and it gets sort of into some of the complexities of the same kinds of issues that Plaza Suites is. Whatever it's trying to do with them, right?
But
about
more
fathers
cinematic.
And daughters and cheating and divorce, but it's like complicated and funny, womenizing, like a man trying to be someone he's not, right? It's got all these same kinds of things, but it's super entertaining.
Yeah. So if you were like Christina, if you watch Plaza Suite and it's a rough go, check out Crazy Stupid Love. That was a great movie. I enjoyed that one.
So good. I love it.
So my choice is really the only connecting tissue to Plaza Suite is that it's an anthology film with 3 stories, and it's just a much better version of that. It's a dramatic film, and you might have heard of it because we read some Miley Malloy in at UNR. Like I think didn't we read one of her books?
Love Maureen Malloy. I've
Maureen
read
Malloy.
every single one of her books. I teach her books sometimes. I love her.
So in 2016, Christina, Kelly Reichardt, a great director, she made this movie called Certain Women, and it's based on 3 stories by Maureen Malloy. And it's a fascinating film about women,
I not know about
female
this?
relationships. You have not heard of this movie?
No.
Yeah, it kind of came and went. It didn't make a huge mark at the box office. It's a very quiet, kind of intimate drama. I think it got a limited release.
I was really busy.
It's got in its stories, it has Laura Dern, Kristen Stewart, and Michelle Williams. Like three great actresses. You know, Michelle Williams.
Me who Michelle Williams
she's in Brokeback Mountain and Blue Valentine. My Week with Marilyn, Manchester by the Sea.
Oh, don't say that movie name. Okay, I was gonna get there.
She's the blonde actress in Manchester by the Sea.
After I saw that movie, not only could I not hear the name of that movie spoken out loud for like a year without bursting into tears, but I couldn't watch anything that actress was in because she was that movie. Like her scene
at the end where she breaks down.
Mm-hmm. I had nightmares about it. Like I couldn't sleep at night because of that movie. And then she was in The Greatest Showman on Earth.
Yeah.
And I was able to fall in love with that movie, even though
trying to forget. So yeah, Manchester by the Sea came out in 2016.
Yes, okay, I love her.
Certain Women came out the same year, 2016. And
watched that instead of Manchester by the Sea, and I wouldn't have been so traumatized.
And it's 3 stories. It's based on 3 stories by Malloy, and it's just
stories. Do you know
the one that I remember? It's the one that I remember the most because I haven't seen it since 2016 or 2017. The last story in the film is Kristen Stewart. She like stumbles into that class where she befriends.
Oh yeah.
Like I think it's the teacher that she befriends, and like there's some really great kind of relationships in the movie
she drives all the way. Yes, yeah, it's from
Kristen Stewart drives a great distance to teach this like community college class.
And then there's
another character like stumbles in and kind of becomes interested.
That was actually the story that I recommended for our anthology that we worked on with Baobab.
Oh, perfect.
Because she's actually physically crossing the continental divide multiple times. Remember that the theme for that anthology was like west of the continental divide, but she's physically crossing it multiple times in the story. Plus I loved that story, but I can't believe I can't remember what it's called, but it's
definitely check out that film, Christina, Certain Women by Kelly Reichardt. It's really great.
And Walter loves Maureen Malloy too. He's read every single one.
I believe it's the only film adaptation of any of Malloy's work, so definitely worth a look.
Yay,
there's a great disc. I rented I think it was a Criterion Collection Blu-ray disc that had multiple like bonus features and interviews with the cast and crew. It's really really cool. Check it out.
Yeah.
All right. So our final segment, Beyond the Flick. I almost feel like we've talked about Maureen Stapleton most of the time. I feel like we should talk about her career too. But Lee Grant, who is one of my favorites, she is interesting, Christina, in that 2 of my 5 favorite movies Lee Grant is in.
Really?
Yeah. Defending Your Life, my favorite comedy, and Mulholland Drive by David Lynch. She has a small role.
I have seen that movie. When you gave me the list, I was like, God, that looks familiar. And I've seen most of David Lynch's movies.
Oh, okay. So you've seen some of his work.
Obsessed for a while.
Yeah.
But I only barely remember. I remember that was one of the ones where at the end I thought I really need to watch that 5 more times to figure out what just happened.
Yeah.
And I don't think I ever got around to it.
Yeah. So it's.
But I want to watch it again.
Mulholland Drive is 2.5 hours long, and Lee Grant has one scene of maybe 2 minutes.
I was gonna say I don't even remember her from that.
She walks up to the door and she sees something. She sees something that's not right with Naomi Watts' character, and it's
kind of very dramatic moment.
Yeah, it's very brief, so I would not call it a great Lee Grant movie.
Okay.
She's in as you saw, recently, she's in a lot more of Defending Your Life. But before we get to Defending Your Life, which you also just watched recently. Some other favorites of mine with Lee Grant. So I watched this video about her career, really interesting. Like she started acting in film in the early 50s. She got her first Oscar nomination in 1952. Wow. And then she was blacklisted for 12 to 14 years. She could not act in movies. There was this thing in like the 50s, early 60s.
Like McCarthy blacklisted,
yeah,
or for
kind of.
some other reason? Oh
Yeah, and
no.
so yeah, it was like it's yeah, you have to read up on it. It's really
I
interesting.
will,
This
because that's
period of where
fascinating.
some actors and directors, they
Yep.
just couldn't work for a while, and they had
I
to
mean, I'm
some like.
familiar with that happening. I didn't realize she was one of the people
So it
that
took until she
went
was
through
like in
that.
her mid 30s to start acting in films again, and then when she comes back, she's in The Heat of the Night, one of the great films of the late 60s,
That's one that I really want to see
with
that I haven't seen.
Rod Steiger and Sidney Poitier. It was,
Everybody's
I mean,
heard
a
of it.
landmark year of movies in 1967. That year also included The Graduate and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and Bonnie and
I also
Clyde.
haven't seen. I haven't seen almost any old movies. It's
Well,
terrible.
just
I'm
just
making a
ask
list
just
here.
ask me for recommendations.
But you're not going to
But
send me to
Lee
Plaza Suites, right?
Lee Grant is she's in The Heat of the Night. Fantastic. And then she got 3 more Oscar nominations in the next decade. She's in a film called The Landlord, the first feature film by director Hal Ashby, who would go on to make Harold and Maude, which you might have heard of.
I love Harold and Maude. I do. I love it. It's one of my
And
favorites.
he also directed Being There with Peter Sellers, a very famous film from the 70s. And he directed Shampoo, which starred Warren Beatty and Goldie Hawn and Julie Christie. And Lee Grant is in that, and that's the film that won her an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. Okay. She's fantastic in Shampoo. So my third favorite of hers would be Shampoo. If you like Lee Grant, if you want to know more about her career, definitely check that film out.
Yeah, I will.
That's what she won an Oscar for. And then In the Heat of the Night, going beyond Lee Grant, just such a fascinating film, a really great kind of drama, about racial issues.
Yeah, I can't believe I haven't seen it.
Sidney Poitier, who had an incredible 67. He's in To Sir with Love, In the Heat of the Night, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Like 3 great classic films in 1 year.
I've actually heard of all of those.
Like fantastic. And then so yeah, it was hard for me to like pick Mulholland Drive as the favorite because she's in one scene. So I'm gonna just say it's a tie. It's a tie between 2 of my 5 favorite movies, Mulholland Drive and Defending Your Life. But if I had to pick, if you didn't know who Lee Grant was and wanted to see a good film that she was in, my number 1 pick would be Defending Your Life because she plays a more substantial role in that film. So she's
actually my favorite character in that.
So yeah, and we have a bonus episode about Defending Your Life dropping too. But just briefly, Christina, what did you think of Defending Your Life?
I thought it was funny. It was, it's a bit dated, 1991. I was cracking up. That this whole theme of like this beautiful middle place where everything tastes good and everything's beautiful, but it looks like a business complex.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I think that's part of the
trashy hotels.
Yeah, part of the joke is that like these people, these beings or whatever they are, they're like, oh, what do human beings think the city looks like?
We have suggestion boxes on every corner. I thought it was funny, and she was my favorite character because those scenes in there where she was kind of grilling him, and
she's a great prosecutor.
She was really interesting. Her character was interesting.
She would scare me too.
Oh, she was terrifying, and I could have had her in that movie more. But it was fun. It was a fun movie.
Yeah, and it's obviously it's Albert Brooks and Meryl Streep is in it, and great. You got Buck Henry and Rip Torn. I mean, great actors in it. Really unique, funny concept. Like what happens after we die? You go to a place where
the processing
your life is examined. Your life is examined over the course of 4 days, where you look at clips from your life.
And the clips are so bizarre. Like the clips that they choose for this poor guy. Like Meryl Streep is like saving a cat out of a burning building, and this poor guy is getting caught at his worst half the time.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a movie that meant a lot to me when I was in high school. I just, I had a lot of fear when I was young, right? I was just always afraid. I get stomach aches and, and this movie kind of helped. Like I was able to kind of push past a lot of that fear. So it kind of goes beyond just like this kind of silly comedy for me. It's like, it meant a lot to me when I was growing up, and it kind of helped me through some issues I had when I was 16, 17. This movie helped.
Because that's what it's all about, right? Fear. It's like you can't
go after your dreams, do what you want to do if you're always afraid,
or like
to push
spiritually progress, like the thing that we're supposed to be doing our whole lives, which is always learning and growing and becoming better humans, making the world a better place. And fear is the thing that
Yeah.
holds us back from doing that a lot. Yeah, it was a
And
great
speaking
scene.
and speaking of Lee Grant, I just love that she's always on him. She's the prosecutor. She's trying to make him look weak all throughout the movie. And when she finally towards the end makes him say out loud, "I was afraid," to go
Yeah.
upstairs with Meryl Streep's
Mhm.
character Julia, you almost see this little wince in Lee Grant's face, like, oh, I didn't like having to do that. It's my job,
Right.
but I had to do it because that's what I'm supposed to do here.
I thought
Um,
it was interesting that the assumption was that you are somehow failed or are terrible if you have to go back for another life.
mm,
That was the thing that I was
yeah.
like, but if you're not there yet spiritually,
So
right?
so so if this were
Why
if
not
this
give it
were
another
if this
go?
were a true story, Christina, how many times do you think you've lived so far?
Oh, me personally, hundreds,
Hundred.
hundreds of times.
This is number
I
207.
Yeah, I don't know, but I actually do. I definitely lean towards believing in past lives and reincarnation, and so I was excited about the movie being about that,
Yeah,
even
not a
though
lot of movies are about this,
mm-mm.
about any kind of subject of life after death. That's pretty rare in the film world, unusually enough. So I
Yeah,
think
and
it
it
was
was
done
cool
pretty
that
well
that
here.
was, we're so used to seeing things that are like, center around Christ-based
Mhm.
religion,
Yeah,
right? And
exactly.
so it was cool that it was not about that, that it
Mhm.
was kind of
Yeah. So yeah, if you're interested in the career of Lee Grant, I would definitely recommend you check out Shampoo, In the Heat of the Night, and Defending Your Life. And if you like the work of David Lynch or interested in his work, watch Mulholland Drive 2. It is a thing.
it is it's a big thing. It's like a lot of something.
But you can't just watch it once. That's the problem with
No,
Mulholland
you
Drive.
can't,
You
or
got to
you're
watch it a lot.
so confused afterwards. So
All
confused.
right, so that takes us to the end here, Christina. Thanks so much for being on Film at 50 today. Do you
Thank
have
you for
anything
having
you want
me.
to promote, or like a social media channel, like we can check out more of your
I
writing or
should.
anything?
I mean, I should, right? I did have a story. Well, I've been kind of busy at Olympic College recently,
Little bit
so
busy as a college professor.
I did have a story published in Minerva Rising. I was actually supposed to read from it at the Minerva Rising event at AWP last year in San Antonio, and then it was canceled at the
All
last
right.
minute
Mhm.
due to COVID. But yeah, you can check that. That's my most
And you've
recent
had
short story.
you've had some poetry published too, right?
I have, yeah. One in the palimpsest.
Okay.
Palimpsest. I can never say it or spell it right. But it's like the Yale graduate literary journal. I have a poem in there.
Okay.
I have another poem somewhere. Oh, the clover.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So
So
if you're
yeah,
interested in Christina's work, go find it online. It's fantastic. So yeah, thanks for being here, Christina. And thanks to all of you for listening. You can find us online at filmat50.com, all the socials, and you can find us at Patreon at patreon.com/film at50. We have 2 bonus episodes a month. So check that out and support the podcast. Until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.